Okay, welcome back, everybody. Today's lesson is about oil, and since I listened and heard you loud and clear that my last lecture was a little bit too long, I will try to go through this much quicker for you. Oil is created millions of years ago by the deposit of dead sea organisms that have been deposited on the bottom of the ocean. So the hydrocarbons that you see, the hydrocarbon bonds that we need for the energy, come from sea organisms. Okay, as they get deposited on the seabed, the rock layers build up, and then trapping the sea organisms in a layer of rock called shale. And the shale is the rock that's formed at the bottom of ancient oceans with that plant and animal material. When it gets heated and squeezed, the hydrocarbons are removed from the plants and animals and come out in a form of what we like to call oil or natural gas. So oil is another one of those fossil fuels from ancient sea organisms. Now, once the rock layer, the shale layer, is deposited, normally it's deposited in horizontal layers. Then, through plate tectonics, the continents collide. When the continents collide, they bend the rock, and it takes what was a shale layer, which you can kind of see here. This is the shale layer. And it takes that shale layer and bends it so that you create domes and kind of like valleys. And since oil, the hydrocarbons of oil and gas, are lighter than the obviously dense rock, they will migrate to the top of these domes where a non-porous rock traps it. And so what you have is the better refined natural gas sitting at the top of the dome, and then underneath it is usually the large reserves of oil. So then what geologists have to do is go looking across the Earth's surface and try to figure out what rock layers are underneath the land. And then once they find out where one of these domes are, they will then set up a drill and drill down into that dome and to collect the natural gas and then eventually the oil. So it's usually trapped in these domes, and that's our traditional way of finding oil. As you're going to learn, there's newer techniques where we don't have to do that type of exploration anymore. So what comes out of the ground is not typical oil that you're used to thinking about. This is actually called crude oil. All right. Crude oil is different. It's made up of many different materials, as you're going to find out, that have to be separated. It's usually very thick, very gooey, and you can see the picture here of it sitting on a rock. It contains tar. It stains if you touch it. It's not your typical oil that you think of when we talk about oil in our society. Basically, when you pull it out of the ground, it comes in two forms. If it's very thick and gooey, like this one over here, we call this heavy crude. Heavy crude is a less quality oil that you find. And then you got this light crude, which is the real good stuff, because it has more of the products that we're looking for in our society. Because this one, in terms of light crude, are going to have more of your gasoline, your diesel, and your products that we like to use, where the heavy crude is more on the tar and the real heavy crude oil, or the heavy oils that we use in less amounts in our society. So you have good quality oil and bad quality oil as you pull it out of the ground. Once you find that dome, the oil doesn't come out by itself. It has to be pumped out, and that's where you see the famous oil pumps. So what do we actually pull out of the ground in terms of barrels? And just so you know, real quickly, that when you talk about a barrel of oil, you're talking about 42 gallons. It's not typical when you talk about barrels. In oil, it's 42 gallons is a barrel, not 50 gallons as most people think. But when you pull that out, about half of what's in traditional crude oil is gasoline that you're so familiar with. The heavier stuff, the fuel oil and stuff, about 23% is your diesel and heating oil. And then usually the most important ones are the jet fuel, but most importantly, the asphalt. that you see on the roads and stuff, that's actually comes out of the ground with your gasoline. So the idea is that when you pull it out of the ground, it's not the end of the process, but rather the beginning, because you have to take it, ship it to a location where you then take that oil and separate it into the products that we want. So it's not a simple way. So you have to transport it. How do we transport it? Well, we either transport it by pipe, okay, across the land, or by ship. And we're not talking about small ships. This is the largest one in the world, where you're looking at, huge ships carrying huge amounts of oil, transporting across all the oceans. There are thousands of these ships out every single day, and they carry oil from one location to another. And this particular ship, if you want to get perspective on the size of it, if you look back in the kind of the cabins and stuff back in the back of it, back here. Whoops. My clicker didn't work there. There we go. In this back area right here, you can count the number of stories. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5 stories tall, just that one white section of the boat. Just to give you some perspective, these oil tankers, what we call super tankers, are huge, carrying huge amounts of oil. We'll get into oil tankers a lot later. But then they take them to oil refineries. All right, this is the process at which oil is separated into all its different products. You see these all over the place. This is the process by which we create the gasoline that we use in our cars. So how does it work? The process is actually quite complicated, but to simplify it for us, what we're going to do is just look at taking a barrel of crude oil, okay, and all they do is they pump it into a boiler where literally it is boiled and turned into a gas. All right, that gas goes into a distillation tower or a cracking tower, and the gas, as it moves up in the tower, it cools and condenses back into liquids. And each of the products of gasoline condense at a different temperature. So the stuff that condenses very quickly at very high temperatures will come out, and that's usually your really, really thick stuff, okay, including like oil that you use in automobiles and stuff like that. Then as you go up the tower more and more, it's the better refined stuff, the stuff that takes a little bit longer to cool, and you can see the temperatures on the sides until you get all the way up here to what we're always familiar with, gasoline. So basically the process of refining oil is simply boiling it, having it go up a distillation column, collecting it as it condenses back into a liquid, and separating it that way. And that's how we get our different products of oil. All right, now the question is, that process has a huge amount of environmental consequences as we go through this. I think you're well familiar with this. The uses of oil in the United States by far is transportation, and I think that's a pretty simple concept. But here's something you might not be aware of. When we sit there and think about the consequences of using oil in our society, we have a tendency to forget how much of our society is tied up in oil. And so I put the slide up here for you just so you can take a look at all the products that are out there that are actually made from oil. And if you want, you can pause the lecture and take a look at some of these, but you'll be amazed at the number of different products that we have that are actually oil products, including things like makeup and crayons and almost everything that we use in our society today. All right, now, where do we get our oil? Well, the United States has thousands and thousands of oil wells pulling out oil, but one of the largest is found in the northern part of Alaska, and this is in a section in northern Alaska, and it's hard to read up here, so I'm going to write it. It's called Prudhoe Bay. Prudhoe Bay is the northern part of Alaska, and it has a large reserve of oil. It's where the United States gets a large majority of its domestic oil. And up there in Prudhoe Bay, they have a problem. That is how to get that oil from Prudhoe Bay back to the lower 48 states where we use most of it. It's on the ocean. It's on a bay called the Beaufort Bay. That Beaufort Bay is a wonderful habitat for marine life, but at the same time, there's a slight problem with the Beaufort Bay, and that is that it freezes solid every winter. So they can't get ships up there year-round. So in Alaska, they built a pipeline from Prudhoe Bay all the way down the state of Alaska, as you see here, all the way down to a place down in southern Alaska called Valdez. Now, Valdez is a famous name. You might have heard of it before. We'll talk about it here in a minute. All right, so the Alaska Pipeline is a pipeline going from northern Alaska to southern Alaska. It's the length of almost 700 miles, so that would take you from Pennsylvania almost to the state of Florida. It's a huge, huge, long pipeline. Okay, and there it is. It's actually above ground, so that they can check and watch and monitor it for any leaks or any problems that occur. Now, this is where the pipeline ends. It's in a very unique area called Valdez, which you see right up here. And you might have heard of this before. This is the location of the end of the pipeline. So all of your big, gigantic oil tankers come into Prince William Sound and go up through the straits here and then end up over in Valdez, pick up the oil, and then come out just like you're driving a car. Stay on the right-hand side. It goes out into the ocean and heads down into the California and the southern 48 states. This is a very dangerous place. It just so happens that Valdez is so far back. So that's protected basically from the ocean. But unfortunately, that poses a big problem. That is that these giant oil tankers have to be able to navigate these very narrow locations. And what happens is, or actually what happened in 1989 was an unfortunate situation where a tanker called the Exxon Valdez, and that's where I think many of you have probably heard of this word before. It's called the Exxon Valdez. Whoops, sorry, Valdez. It was an oil tanker that got there right before Easter, okay, in 1989, filled with 52 million gallons of oil. Came out of the straits into Prince William Sound, and because of a navigation problem, or what they claim to be a navigation problem, the ship did not stay in the right-hand lane, but rather went in the left-hand lane. It actually went through the left-hand lane, and right here crashed in what they call Bly Reef, which is a series of boulders underground. It tore open the side of the Exxon Valdez, and over the next 2 weeks, 11 million gallons of oil spilled out of the Exxon Valdez and went into Prince William Sound, which is a very pristine wildlife area. Unfortunately, the cleanup techniques and the ability to handle oil spills back in 1989 was not very good. There was very little recovery of the oil. The oil spread, covered over 1,000 miles of beaches, and killed over 1,000 mammals and tens of thousands of birds and countless other animals. And even after the recovery of the oil from the Exxon Valdez, when the cleanup was all over, only 2.6 of the 11 million gallons was cleaned up. The rest remained in the environment and is still there today. You don't actually see it on the beaches, but it is pushed down underneath the gravel and the pebbles and the sand. So if you dig down in the beaches of any of these islands, you go down about a foot and a half, you will discover oil down there. Scientists estimate that the oil will remain there for the next 100 years or more. So the idea is now to continue a pipeline from Alaska all the way down into Canada to connect the crude coming out of Prudhoe Bay down into the southwestern part of Canada, which will become very, very important in a few slides. There's one other problem up in the northern part of Alaska, and there's a controversy going on in an area that's called the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So let me just write that real quick. And here we are again, having some problems here. Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And it's abbreviated, and I'll be saying it all the time this way. It's abbreviated ANWR. Okay? And ANWR is a beautiful location up in the northeastern part of Alaska. And what happened was, in the 1930s and 40s, Congress declared it a national wildlife refuge and that it should be left untouched. At the same time, Canada agreed to, right across the line from Alaska, agreed to preserve even a larger section of Canada for the exact same purpose. So you ended up with a large wildlife reserve up here. This is ANWR. All right, and it continues all the way over here into Canada. And so the idea is that this area was supposed to be preserved for wildlife. Well, oil companies found out that there's oil in ANWR. All right, and they claim that it's only a small portion of ANWR in this little 2,000-acre site right here. And what they want to do is they want to drill for oil there. And the only way you can drill for oil there is if Congress declassifies it as a wildlife refuge and opens it up for drilling. And as of now, that has not happened. There are people who've been lobbying Congress, and even Congress in themselves, who have liked to see this open up for oil drilling, and has been trying for the last about 25 years, and so far has been unsuccessful. If you look at where the drilling they want it to occur, in this area called the coastal plain of ANWR, this little section is where the oil is, all right, right next to the Beaufort Sea. All right, Prudhoe Bay is over in this section over here, and this particular location is their favorite spot where they want to drill for the oil. But again, it has not been done yet, but they do want to open it up. Why do they want it open up? Why are they so interested in this? Well, if you look at this chart, here's the possible reserves in ANWR. You are looking at this line on the chart going back from 2005. Oh, darn. Here we go. Try it again. Going back to 2005, here's the oil production from the lower 48 states. Okay. Now, if you add Alaska in with that, this is our total domestic production of the United States oil. And if you notice as you go across to, starting, a little bit later over in this area, it starts to go down because they know the production of oil in the United States is going to be going down. But if you include ANWR in the highest predictions of how much oil might be underground there, you can add that much more oil to our total amount. The lowest prediction would be in red, okay, which would be the line here. Blue is what most people agree upon is sitting there in ANWR, and so you could raise the production of oil in our country by a small amount, about that much in the future, if we open up ANWR. All right, if you're talking about total amount of oil, it's not a huge amount, but it's still a significant amount if you're looking at it as a possible way of filling in and adding to the oil that we're going to be losing from production in the lower 48 states.